my name is Billy. And before I tell you what happened to me, I need you to know one thing. I never wanted my life to be this way. I was born in a small town where houses leaned close to one another and gossip traveled faster than the wind. To the world outside, my family looked ordinary. People thought my father was a hardworking man, my mother a quiet woman, and me, just a little girl with a shy smile. But behind the closed doors of our home, the truth was much darker. My father was a man with shadows in his heart. He carried anger like other men carry bread, always in his hands, always ready to be used. He drank until his voice turned into thunder, and when thunder rolled, pain always followed. I remember the first time I saw him hit my mother. I must have been only 7. She had forgotten to put enough salt in his food. That was all it took. His hand flew across her face, and I saw her body fall against the wall. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. That night, as I lay in bed, my mother came to me. Her face was swollen, her eyes red. She touched my hair gently and whispered, "Don't cry, Billy. Just don't make him angry." Her words sank into me like poison. I learned that love in our home came with fear. Years passed, and the walls of that house became a prison. I grew taller, older, but never freer. Every day was the same storm, my father's rage, my mother's silence, my own heart breaking quietly in the shadows. But deep inside, a small flame lived. A flame that whispered, "One day, you will leave. One day, you will be more than this pain." I held on to that flame with everything I had, because without it, I would have been nothing. When I turned 11, the storm inside my house changed direction. Until then, my father's cruelty had mostly fallen on my mother. She bore his blows in silence, like a wall that refused to fall no matter how many times it was struck. But one evening, his eyes landed on me instead. It was such a small mistake. I had dropped a glass of water while setting the table. The sound of it shattering filled the room like a scream. For a moment, there was silence. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my chest. And then, he rose. His face twisted, his footsteps heavy. I backed away, but there was nowhere to run. His hand came down across my cheek, and the world blurred. Pain burned through my skin, and I tasted blood at the corner of my mouth. I thought he would stop. He didn't. That night was the first time I learned what it meant to be truly afraid of the person who gave you life. My mother tried to shield me, but he pushed her away. His voice thundered through the walls. "You think you can make mistakes and get away with it? Not in my house. Not under my roof." I curled into myself, praying he would stop. Eventually, he did. But something had already broken inside me. The next morning, I looked in the mirror. My cheek was swollen, purple blooming like a cruel flower across my skin. I touched it with trembling fingers and whispered to myself, "Don't cry. Don't show weakness." But tears came anyway. From that day forward, I was no longer invisible. I was no longer just a child hiding behind my mother's suffering. I had become his second target. School became my only escape. There, I could pretend for a few hours that I was normal, that I belonged. But even at school, whispers followed me. Teachers noticed the bruises. Friends asked questions I couldn't answer. So I lied. I fell. I tripped. It's nothing. Each lie was a brick, building a wall around me. A wall that kept the truth hidden but trapped me inside. That night, my mother came to me again. Her face was pale, her voice a fragile thread. "I'm sorry, Billy," she whispered. "I can't protect you anymore. You must be strong. stronger than me. I wanted to ask her why she stayed, why she didn't take me and run far away from him. But the words never left my mouth, because deep inside, I already knew the answer. Fear had chained her, and love for me had silenced her. So I nodded. I promised her and myself that I would endure. But promises cannot stop fists. And that was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. But the bruises on my skin never truly faded, because as soon as one healed, another would take its place. At first, I tried to cover them. Long sleeves in the summer, scarves even when the heat made me dizzy. I avoided questions with nervous smiles, with half-truths that even I stopped believing. But the scars weren't only on my body. They were inside me too. Every time his footsteps echoed in the hallway, my heart leapt into my throat. Every time his voice rose, I shrank a little smaller, as though if I could just disappear, the storm might pass without striking me. Childhood should have been laughter, games, and dreams. Mine was silence. Mine was waiting for the next blow, the next insult, the next night when I'd cry quietly into my pillow so no one could hear. At school, I drifted further from the other girls. They spoke about birthday parties, pretty dresses, and boys who smiled at them. I sat alone, my books clutched to my chest, pretending to read while my mind drowned in fear. Sometimes, teachers looked at me with pity. Once, my English teacher, Mrs. Davis, touched my hand gently and whispered, "If you ever need help, Bili, my door is always open." But how could I tell her? How could I speak the truth when my father's words rang in my ears every night? "If you ever speak against me, I will end you." Do you hear me, girl? I will end you. So I stayed quiet. I wore silence like a second skin. But there were small things that kept me alive. I had a diary, a little, worn notebook with a faded blue cover. At night, when the house was quiet, I wrote down everything I couldn't say out loud. The pages became my only friend, my only witness. I am still here. I want to be free. One day I will leave. The diary held my secrets, my tears, my fragile hope. One evening, as I was writing, my younger brother peeked into my room. His name was Daniel, just 9 years old, with eyes too innocent for the darkness we lived in. "Why are you crying, Bili?" he asked softly. I closed the diary quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm not crying, Danny. Just tired." He frowned, then climbed onto my bed and hugged me. His little arms wrapped around me, warm and trusting. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't only surviving for myself. I was surviving for him, too. If I broke, who would protect him? But no matter how strong I tried to be, the scars grew deeper. Some nights, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder if there would ever be a day when I could breathe without fear. And in the darkness, one thought whispered back, "Not while he lives. Not while you are trapped here." There comes a moment in every storm when the sky can no longer hold back its fury. For me, that moment came when I was 14. It was a cold winter evening. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the windows, but the real storm was inside our house. My father had been drinking again. His eyes were glassy, his words sharp as knives. Dinner was on the table, just soup and bread, nothing more. I had been slow in setting it down because Daniel had asked me for help with his homework. That small delay was all it took. He slammed his fist against the table, the dishes rattling. "Lazy girl," he roared. "Do you think you can waste my time? Do you think you're better than me?" I froze. My mother whispered, "Please, she's just a child." but he shoved her so hard she nearly fell. Then he turned on me. His hand struck my face once, twice. I stumbled back, but he followed, his anger like fire, burning everything in its path. He grabbed my arms so tightly I thought the bone might snap. "Answer me," he screamed. "Why do you always make me angry? Why can't you just obey?" Something inside me cracked. Not my arm, not my skin, something deeper. The silence I had carried for years finally shattered. With tears streaming down my face, I shouted back. "Because you're a monster. You hurt us, you hurt Mom, you hurt me, and I hate you for it." The words burst out of me like flames, raw and unstoppable. For a second, the whole room went still. My father's eyes widened in shock. My mother gasped. Daniel's small voice whispered, "Bili." And then the storm struck harder than ever. He raised his hand again, but this time it wasn't just a slap. It was a closed fist. The blow knocked me to the floor. My vision blurred, the world spinning. I felt warm blood drip down my lip. I thought he might kill me right there. But my mother threw herself between us, screaming enough. "You'll kill her." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not just for herself, but for me. She clung to him, begging while I lay on the floor, trembling, broken. That night, as I lay in bed with bruises covering my body, I realized something. Silence would no longer save me. The diary, the whispered hopes, they weren't enough anymore. If I didn't fight back, if I didn't find a way out, one day he truly would kill me. And no one would even know my name. After the breaking point, I carried something new inside me, fear, yes, but also a spark. A fragile flame that whispered, "You cannot stay here forever." The bruises from that night lingered for weeks. My cheekbone ached every time I touched it, and my ribs hurt when I breathed too deeply. But worse than the pain was the silence. At home, no one spoke about what had happened. My mother's eyes carried apology, Daniel's eyes carried fear, and my father carried on as though nothing had happened. But I remembered every detail, and I swore I would not let myself forget. At school, something shifted. I no longer tried so hard to hide my pain. Perhaps it was because I had grown too tired, or perhaps because deep down I wanted someone to notice. And someone did. Her name was Claire. She sat next to me in math class, a quiet girl with soft brown hair and kind eyes. One morning, when I lifted my sleeve to reach for a pencil, she caught sight of the bruises that stained my wrist. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Bili, who did this to you?" I froze. No one had ever asked me directly before. My instinct was to lie, to retreat into silence. But her gaze was steady, filled with something I hadn't felt in a long time, genuine care. My throat tightened. Words caught like thorns. And then, before I could stop myself, I whispered the truth. My father. The moment the confession slipped out, I felt both terrified and relieved. Terrified because of his threats, but relieved because, for once, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. "You don't deserve this," she said. "No one does. Please, let me help you." I wanted to believe her. But trust was a fragile thing, and mine had been shattered too many times. "Don't tell anyone," I begged. "If he finds out, it will be worse." She nodded slowly. "I promise. But you're not alone, Bili. Not anymore." For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could stand by me. That night, I wrote in my diary again, but my words were different. I told Claire the truth. "I am afraid. But maybe I am not as alone as I thought. The fragile hope burned quietly inside me, like a candle in the dark. Small, trembling, but enough to keep me alive for one more day. And sometimes, one more day is all you need to survive. For a little while, hope carried me. It was fragile, but it gave me strength. I would sit in class, and when my mind wandered to the darkness at home, I reminded myself, Claire knows. I am not invisible anymore. But hope can be dangerous when you live in a house built on fear, because the shadows always return. One evening, my father came home earlier than usual. His steps were heavy, his face already flushed with drink. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when he stormed in. "Where's my dinner?" he barked. "It's almost ready," I stammered. Almost wasn't enough. He grabbed the plate from the counter and hurled it against the wall. The crash rang through the kitchen like thunder, shards of porcelain scattering across the floor. "You useless girl," he shouted. "Can't you do one thing right?" My hand shook. I wanted to disappear, to hide in my room and lock the door, but before I could move, he struck me across the face. The world spun, the taste of blood filling my mouth. Daniel cried out, "Stop. Please stop," but my father shoved him aside. For the first time in weeks, I felt my small spark of hope dimming. Because I realized something awful, hope could not stop his fists. That night, as I lay bruised in my bed, I thought of Claire. Her kind eyes, her promise that I wasn't alone. For a moment, I almost wished I had never told her. Because if she knew the truth, she might see just how powerless I really was. And yet, a part of me longed to tell her everything. To let someone finally see the depth of the shadows I lived in. But another part of me whispered the words I had heard all my life. "Stay silent. Stay hidden. Or he will destroy you." The next morning, when I walked into school with a swollen lip and a bruise darkening my cheek, Claire's eyes widened. She didn't speak in class, but at lunch she pulled me aside. "Bili," she whispered, "it's worse, isn't it?" I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I nodded. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I felt safe in her arms. But even as she whispered, "I'll help you, I promise," I knew the shadows were waiting for me at home. And they always found a way back. After that night, something began to change, not inside my house, but inside my heart. The bruises were still there. The fear was still there. But so was Claire. One afternoon, she pulled me aside after class. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Bili, you can't go on like this. We have to do something." I shook my head quickly. "No. If he finds out, if anyone finds out, it'll be worse." She took my hands in hers. "But you can't stay trapped forever. You'll break." Her words haunted me. At night, while my father's angry footsteps echoed through the house, I would lie awake and imagine another life. A life where I could breathe without fear. A life where my diary wasn't my only listener. Could such a life really exist? The next day, Claire whispered a plan. Not a big one, just a beginning. "There's a teacher, Mrs. Turner. She's kind and she listens. If you can't tell her, I will. She can help." She has to. Panic rose in my chest. "No, you can't," he said if I ever told anyone. "Bili," she said softly, "he's already destroying you. If we stay silent, he wins. But if we speak," she hesitated, tears in her eyes. "If we speak, maybe you'll finally be free." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to grab that tiny thread of hope and hold on with everything I had. But fear had its claws deep in me. Every memory of his fists, his shouts, his threats, they wrapped around me like chains. Still, that night, when I wrote in my diary, my words were different again. Maybe escape is possible. Maybe there is a door I cannot yet see. Maybe someone can help me open it. The thought was terrifying. But it was also the first time I had ever dared to imagine a future that wasn't filled with pain. And sometimes, even the smallest plan can be enough to change everything. The secret plan gave me something new to hold on to. For the first time, I began to imagine freedom, not just in dreams, but as a real possibility. Claire's words echoed in my mind. If we speak, maybe you'll finally be free. But silence is a heavy chain, and the price of keeping it was about to grow unbearable. One evening, my father came home later than usual. His shirt smelled of smoke and alcohol, his eyes bloodshot, his voice sharp as broken glass. I tried to stay out of sight, but he found me. "Where were you today?" he demanded. "At school," I answered quickly, keeping my voice small. He narrowed his eyes. "You've been talking to someone, haven't you?" My blood froze. How could he know? Had he seen me with Claire? Had someone told him? "No," I whispered. "I haven't." The slap came before I finished the sentence. My head snapped to the side, and stars burst behind my eyes. "Liar," he shouted. "I can see it in your face." He shoved me against the wall, his hand gripping my throat just enough to steal my breath. "If you ever open your mouth to anyone, I swear, Billy, you won't live to regret it." His words carved themselves into me like fire. Later that night, I sat curled in my room, shaking, clutching my diary with trembling fingers. My tears blurred the page as I wrote. "I am trapped. I cannot tell. If I speak, he will kill me." But then, almost against my will, another line appeared. "If I stay silent, he already is." The thought terrified me more than his fists ever had. The next day, Claire noticed immediately. She saw the fresh bruise, the way my hands shook when I tried to hold my pencil. Her eyes filled with rage and sorrow all at once. "Billy," she whispered fiercely, "he's going to destroy you." I can't stay quiet anymore. I won't. I grabbed her arm, begging, "Please. If he finds out, it will be worse. For me. For Daniel. For my mom." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "But if I don't, one day he'll go too far." Her words pierced me like a knife, because deep down I knew they were true. Every beating, every threat, every night I survived felt like one step closer to the day I might not. And yet, I stayed silent, because fear still owned me. The price of silence was my body, my voice, my childhood. And I was paying it every single day. The days blurred together, each one marked by the same cycle: fear, silence, survival. But something inside me was shifting. The bruises faded and returned, but Claire's words never left me. One day, he'll go too far. I kept wondering, what would too far look like? I didn't have to wait long to find out. It was a Friday night. Rain hammered against the roof, the kind of storm that makes the world feel darker, heavier. My father had been drinking since the afternoon, his anger simmering with every glass. Daniel and I sat quietly in the living room, hoping to be invisible. But monsters always find you when you're hiding. He staggered in, his eyes wild. "Why is this place such a mess?" he roared, though everything was spotless. Daniel whispered, "Please, let's just go upstairs." But before we could move, my father grabbed me by the arm and yanked me to my feet. "You think you can keep secrets from me, Billy?" His voice was a growl. "I know you've been talking. I know you've been plotting." "No," I cried. I haven't. But my words only fueled his rage. He struck me hard across the face, and I fell to the floor. Daniel rushed forward, shouting, "Stop! Leave her alone." That was when it happened, the breaking point. My father shoved Daniel so violently that he hit the edge of the table and crumpled to the ground, clutching his side and crying out in pain. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't weighing fear against survival. All I could see was Daniel, my little brother, hurting because of me. I screamed, louder than I ever had before. "Stop! Don't touch him. Don't touch us again." The sound of my own voice startled me. It startled him too. For a moment, he froze, his hand midair. The storm outside crashed against the windows, thunder shaking the house. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, when I finally crawled into bed, my body aching, my mind replayed the moment over and over. My scream, his hesitation, the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't as small as he thought. I wrote in my diary with shaking hands. Something broke tonight. Not me. Him. I am afraid. But I am also awake. Maybe the time for silence is ending. For the first time in my life, I felt a spark of power, tiny, fragile, but real. And once a spark is lit, it can become a fire. After that night, something inside me refused to go back to sleep. The silence that had wrapped around me for so long began to feel heavier than his fists. Every bruise healed, but the memory of Daniel crying out on the floor, because of me, because of him, never faded. For the first time, anger burned hotter than fear. At school, Claire noticed immediately. I wasn't the same Billy anymore. I walked slower, my eyes tired, but there was something different in my voice when I spoke. She touched my arm gently. "What happened?" I hesitated, but then I whispered, "He hurt Daniel." Her face turned pale. "Billy, this has to stop. We have to tell someone. I'll go with you. We'll tell Mrs. Turner or the police or anyone. Please." My heart raced. The thought of speaking the truth felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. One step forward could mean freedom or the fall of everything I had left. But then I remembered Daniel's tears, his small body shaking in pain. I remembered my own scream, the way it had made my father hesitate for the first time. And in that memory, I felt it again, the fire inside me. That night, while my father snored in the other room, I opened my diary and wrote, "I am not only a victim. I am a sister. I am a fighter. I will not let him win." My hands trembled, but my words were clear. The next day, I told Claire the unthinkable. "I'll do it. I'll tell Mrs. Turner." Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." For the first time, I let myself believe her. I wasn't free yet. The walls of my house still felt like a prison, and the shadows of his footsteps still haunted me. But something had changed forever. There was a spark in me now. A spark that no fist could break, no threat could smother. It was the fire inside. And I knew one day, that fire would burn down the chains he had built around me. The morning air felt heavier than usual, as if the whole world knew what I was about to do. My stomach twisted with fear, but deep down, something steadier carried me forward, the fire that had started burning inside me. Claire walked beside me all the way to school. She didn't let go of my hand once. Her presence felt like a shield, thin but real. "Are you sure?" she whispered. I nodded, though my knees trembled. "I have to be." Mrs. Turner was sitting at her desk when we entered the classroom. She looked up, smiling kindly. Good morning, girls. My voice caught in my throat. My chest tightened. What if she didn't believe me? What if she told him? Claire gave me a small nod, her eyes urging me on. I swallowed hard, then whispered, Mrs. Turner. I need to tell you something, but it's a secret. A really big one. Her smile softened into concern. Of course, Billy. You can tell me anything. The words poured out slowly at first, like drops of rain before a storm. My voice shook. My hands clenched into fists. He hurts me, I whispered. Her eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened. He hurts Daniel too. And he says if I tell anyone, he'll kill us. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but for the first time, I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. Claire squeezed my hand tighter. Mrs. Turner's voice was gentle but firm. Billy, I believe you. And I promise you're not alone anymore. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket I'd never had before. I believed her. For the first time in my life, I actually believed someone could help. It was only a whisper of hope, fragile and small. But to me, it felt like breathing fresh air after years of drowning. That night, when I sat with my diary, I wrote, Today I spoke. Today I was heard. Maybe tomorrow I will be free. The next few days felt like walking on a thin rope stretched over a storm. On the outside, nothing had changed. Our house still smelled of smoke and anger. The walls still echoed with silence. But inside me, everything was different. I had spoken. I had been heard. And that small whisper of hope made me both stronger and more afraid. Because I knew, if he ever found out, the storm inside this house would break loose. It didn't take long. One evening, while Daniel and I sat quietly in our room, we heard his heavy footsteps down the hall. The kind of steps that meant trouble. He pushed the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath thick with alcohol. Who've you been talking to, Billy? His voice was low, dangerous. My chest froze. Somehow he knew. Maybe he had seen me with Mrs. Turner, or maybe his paranoia just painted monsters everywhere. But either way, the walls of my secret had begun to tremble. I haven't, I whispered. He stepped closer, towering over me. Don't lie to me. I know when you lie. His hand curled into a fist, and Daniel whimpered beside me. I thought of Mrs. Turner's words, "You are not alone anymore." I clung to them like a rope in the dark. I didn't lie, I said, my voice shaking. But even if I did, I'm not afraid of you anymore. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His face twisted with fury. The room shook as he slammed his hand against the wall, the sound ringing in my ears. Daniel cried out, grabbing my arm. You think anyone cares about you? He roared. You think anyone's coming to save you? But for the first time, his words didn't sink into me. They bounced off. Because somewhere deep down I knew someone did care. Someone had heard me. And that whisper of hope was louder than his screams. That night, after he finally stormed out, I wrote in my diary with trembling hands. The walls are trembling, but maybe that means they're about to fall. The fear inside our house had grown sharper than ever. Every sound of his footsteps made my heart jump. Every slam of a door made Daniel hide behind me. The walls were closing in, and I knew we couldn't survive much longer. That's when Mrs. Turner made the call. She had promised me I wasn't alone, and that night she proved it. She called the authorities. She told them about me, about Daniel, about the bruises we tried to hide. I didn't know any of this until the next day, when I was pulled out of class by two gentle voices. Billy, they said, we need to talk to you. For a moment, I panicked. What if they didn't believe me? What if he found out? But then I saw Mrs. Turner standing in the hallway, her eyes filled with tears, but also courage. She nodded at me, silently saying, "You're safe now." That night, as Daniel and I sat together in the dark, we heard a knock at the door. Not his knock. A different one. Steady. Strong. The kind of knock that meant change was coming. My father shouted in anger, but for once, his voice didn't control me. Because I knew, beyond the fear, that the storm was about to break. And maybe, just maybe, the sun was waiting on the other side. That night, everything changed. The knock on the door grew louder, steadier. When it opened, the room filled with voices I had never heard before, calm, firm voices that did not belong to him. 2 officers stepped inside, their presence cutting through the shadows like a beam of light. Daniel clung to me, trembling. My father shouted, cursed, his rage spilling into every corner. But for the first time, I wasn't paralyzed. I held Daniel tighter and whispered, "It's over. We're going to be safe." The officers spoke to him firmly, their hands steady. And then, they took him away. His voice echoed down the hall, furious and wild, but the sound grew smaller and smaller until it was gone. For the first time in years, the house was silent. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of peace. Later that night, Mrs. Turner sat with me. She held my hand and looked into my eyes. "You're safe now, Billy. You and Daniel. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Tears spilled down my face, heavy and unstoppable. Not the tears of pain this time, but of release. I whispered through sobs, "Thank you. Thank you for hearing me." That night, I opened my diary one last time. My hand trembled, but my words were steady. I am Billy. I was broken, but I am still here. I was silenced, but I spoke. I was afraid, but I survived. And at the very end, I wrote, "This is not the end of my story. This is the beginning." As I closed my diary, I looked at Daniel sleeping peacefully beside me. For the first time, his face was calm, free from fear. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "We're free now. We'll never go back." The night sky outside seemed endless, but within it, I saw something shining. A promise. A future. And with tears on my cheeks, I said my last goodbye to the girl I had been, the broken, frightened Billy. Because now, I was ready to live.